The government's agreed to let 250 international postgraduate students back into New Zealand under a special exemption scheme. The students will have to complete the mandatory 2 weeks isolation in a government-managed facility and could start arriving as soon as next month. Universities New Zealand has welcomed the move but says it's looking forward to extending the scheme to more students who are stuck offshore due to the pandemic. Education New Zealand is the government agency tasked with promoting this country as an international study destination. Steve Maharey is the chair and joins me now. Good evening. How is this quota going to work? Which students?
Well, they can come from any country as long as they are involved in a PhD study or they are a master's student. So they're basically research students who are at the moment holding a 2020 visa, and they are involved in their studies and cannot study online, so it's best for them to come back to the country to be able to complete their course of study.
So ultimately, who chooses them, and will they be spread around different universities, or how does it work?
It'll depend really on who applies. So at the moment, the Ministry of Education will approach tertiary providers, universities, and polytechs, of course, could also receive students like this to discuss with them who has students at the moment who fit that kind of criteria, got a visa in the midst of their study, valuable students that need to come back in to finish that course of study. When that is worked out, if it's all 250 PhD students, then they'll start to come into the country. If the 250 can't be filled by PhD students, the move will go then to research-based master's students.
Define valuable for us. You said they need to be valuable students. In what way?
Well, they're valuable in a variety of ways. They're valuable to the student, of course, because they are in the midst of their study and need to be able to complete it. But these kinds of students, of course, also are involved in research which is useful to New Zealand. So having them back into the country completing their course of study will be useful to us. So, for example, if they're involved in agricultural studies, of course, that's very useful to New Zealand, particularly at this time. So having them value in that broader sense, both to them and to the country, fits that criteria of a PhD student or a master's student involved in a research program.
So you've got 250 spaces. How many people do you think fit the criteria who have a current visa for 2020 and who are either postgraduate or PhD students versus the number of spots you've got?
I think that's an unknown number because, of course, it will depend on the students saying, yes, I do want to come back. I have settled into being here, but now I know I can get back into the country. I'll apply. It will depend, of course, on the status of their research program. And
but
so
it would be
so
thousands, wouldn't it? It would be thousands, wouldn't it?
Potentially, yes. There are a considerable number of people who were studying. If we go to the overall figures, there are usually about 70,000 students in the country studying at all levels. And of those, yes, we're talking about PhD students being in the thousands, not huge thousands, but a good cohort of them, yes.
So who pays? They go into managed isolation. Who pays for that? Is the student directly billed?
Yeah. The student will pay for their own quarantine, yes.
And at what level? Full price or...
Once again, that'll depend, of course, where they go, but yes, they pay the full costs of their quarantine.
Okay, so this is sort of, well, when you put it in perspective, it is the fifth largest export, education, $5 billion industry. This is a pretty trifling exemption, isn't it?
It is small, but I think the sector have been universally welcoming of this because they've been looking for it for some time. Education New Zealand spends a lot of time working with the sector and has been in contact, of course, right through this pandemic. So today we've been back in contact with them again. They are very happy with this, but as you've heard from the universities, they see this as a sign that things are going to get better, and they want us to get better as fast as they possibly can. Because, as you probably know, I was Vice Chancellor of Mass University for some time. This is a large amount of revenue. It's a significant number of students. It impacts not just on the university that takes in these students. Of course, they go to homestays, they stay in a city, they have a life of the city in many ways as well. But all sorts of things come from this. So there's a real interest now that the door seems to be opening a bit to be able to move as fast as possible, yes.
Could you say more specifically where they may come from?
No, they can't. I can't say that because they could come from anywhere. They could come from Brazil. There's a large number of students who come in from there who typically do agricultural or science-based studies. They could come from India. They could come from China. They could come from Europe. At my university, for example, in the old days, we had 60 nationalities represented in our student body. international student body. So it's a very large spread, and they could come from anywhere depending on them saying they want to come back, but their course of study is ready for them to come back. All of those criteria have to be worked through first.
So the government's greenlighting 250 spots, but how many did the university ask for?
The universities haven't asked for anything. This has been something which has been done by the government trying to think through what it can do to get.
Well, the universities have been asking. The universities have been asking for all the international students to come back. So, were they involved in discussions with a specific number around this exemption? Were they asked for their opinion? Did they give any numbers, as far as you know?
Not with Education New Zealand, they haven't been, no. The contact we've had with them has always been, as you've described, that the universities are very keen to be part of an reopening as quickly as they possibly can, and would like to see, of course, all of their students back across the border. So no number that I've heard of, and no number that's been mentioned to the government specifically. I think the universities really just want to get started on returning to normal as fast as they can.
So Education New Zealand, right? You're supposed to promote us overseas as an international study destination. I mean, with the greatest of respect, what are you doing now?
One of the things we've had to continue to do is, like other countries, like our major competitors, Canada, the UK, Australia, the US to an extent, all of those countries have been trying to maintain contact with their international markets so that they know that those students know that they can come back at some time. The UK has actually allowed some students back in. The Canadians and the Australians haven't done so yet, although they have mentioned at times that they would. So part of our job has been to stay in touch overseas. We have agents, obviously, overseas. We have staff overseas. But on top of that, working with the sector, working with the government, for example, just repatriating students has been part of what ENZ has been assisting with as well. So,
but as other countries, which you'll be acutely aware, as other countries let students back in, like in Europe and the UK, if we're the last cab up off the rank, we're going to miss out, aren't we? Our students, or students that would potentially come to us, are going to make decisions to go elsewhere because we're not accepting them. Only 250.
Yeah, that's one of the main points, I think. One of the things about New Zealand at the moment is it's very well regarded, obviously, internationally, because it's one of the countries that seems to have handled COVID-19 as well as can be handled. So that's given us an enormous reputational advantage. I don't think we want to blow that by letting people back across the border and then finding that the country isn't a safe venue for them anymore. So that's something we must protect. But you're right. We have to try and move at a pace that doesn't leave us behind our main competitors. Otherwise, yes, of course, agents and places around the world will say, well, you can't go to New Zealand, so we'll send you off to Canada or somewhere else. So we have to keep an eye on that, keep pace with them. So far we are, and we're trying to make sure by doing this, I imagine this is one of the motivations for the government, and certainly from what we've heard, it's going to be well received, that people are saying, yes, it's very small, but it is a sign that the government is now putting its toe back in the water, making it clear to people that international education, that $5 billion that's been out there as a revenue, but also all the other gains we get, the government wants that, and this is a signal to both domestic audiences and overseas that the government seriously are going to end up back down that line again.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Steve Maharey, who is the chair of Education New Zealand, and apologies for that slightly dodgy line there.